I'm Mark Peterson, and this is the FEMA Podcast. To meet the many needs of disaster survivors, FEMA partners with a multitude of other agencies. Perhaps our closest partner in providing federal disaster recovery assistance is the U.S. Small Business Administration, the SBA. When a federal disaster is declared, the SBA is authorized to offer low-interest loans to businesses of all sizes and to individual homeowners, renters, and private nonprofit organizations that have sustained damage in a disaster. On today's episode, we sit down with the SBA to learn more about their programs, some misconceptions about disaster assistance, and how the SBA and FEMA are working together every day to help Americans recover from disasters around the country. All right, so we are fortunate to pay a visit to one of our closest partners in disaster assistance delivery, the Small Business Administration. And so to talk a little bit about what the Small Business Administration does in disasters, we have Alejandro Contreras. Alex, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having us. Thank you very much.
So we're going to get right to it. And I'm going to just start with a broad question of what does the SBA do to support disaster survivors when a disaster strikes? I think a lot of people think immediately maybe their state agency or they're thinking FEMA, but they might not always think SBA. So tell me about that.
So the SBA provides low-interest disaster loans direct from the federal government for private property damage. So for homeowners, renters, businesses of all sizes, and private nonprofit organizations, if they had damage in a declared disaster event, they can use an SBA disaster loan to help repair, replace those damages.
So this is like one of the things that we at FEMA always talk about in terms of the tools or the disaster assistance services that can be brought to a disaster area. It could be insurance and federal grants through FEMA and then SBA for loans.
So we like to say that the SBA disaster loan program's the federal government's primary source for long-term recovery. Because for a homeowner, we're providing a loan to help rebuild or repair the primary residence. For homeowners and renters, we're providing loans to help replace the personal property, meaning furniture, appliances, even vehicles. And then businesses, we're providing assistance for the physical damages, so the structure, machinery and equipment, inventory, and also working capital.
So let's talk a little bit about how our agencies prepare for the potential for a disaster. I think maybe the public doesn't always realize that FEMA is always monitoring the potential for disaster situations, severe weather across the country all the time, and I'm assuming SBA is doing the exact same.
Right. So we have, so we're a smaller agency. We have a smaller footprint, I'd say. But we are engaged at every level with FEMA, who's one of our longest, closest partners. Through SBA's Office of Disaster Assistance, where I work, we are on the daily briefing calls, monitoring different events throughout the country. And then we also have field operations centers in Atlanta, Georgia, and Sacramento, California, which between the two of them respond to events in federal regions 1 through 10.
Yeah, and so I'm actually from Region 5 out of Chicago, and I can attest to that because the Small Business Administration is on the very first call that we have about an event that may have just taken place, and they are right there with us every step of the way from preliminary damage assessments. We go out and we determine whether or not an event might warrant federal assistance to setting up disaster recovery centers. I mean, they are right there with us the whole way.
Right. The preliminary damage assessments is a great example of the way, our two agencies work together with the state and local partners to help speed along the recovery. So whenever we get an event and then we have a request from a state to do a joint damage assessment, SBA verifiers or inspectors are out there alongside FEMA and the state and local partners to assess damages. By the time they're finished, we will know if any counties or which counties qualify for an SBA agency declaration also. And that helps the state determine which route they're going to go. Are they going to request a major presidential disaster declaration through FEMA, or maybe it doesn't quite rise to that level and they want to go directly to SBA and request an agency declaration? But at least we've already done that work, and we know at the end of the damage assessment process, at least the state will, which is the best option for them.
So there's a certain criteria for a federal disaster declaration through FEMA, like you mentioned, but then there's also a certain criteria for that agency declaration. What's the difference?
So SBA's criteria for an agency declaration is at least 25 homes and or businesses, it could be any combination of those, with major uninsured damage. So within a county or jurisdiction, it has to have at least 25 homes or businesses with major uninsured damage, and we can declare that county. In addition, any of the contiguous counties or counties that neighbor that county would also be eligible to apply for physical damage loans. So once we've identified those, the governor has to make a request directly to SBA, and SBA's administrator can approve that declaration request.
So you mentioned, I think, a couple of different types of loans in there. So now, what are the types of disaster loans that SBA offers?
So there's three main categories of disaster loans that SBA provides. Home disaster loans, so that would be loans to homeowners and renters, business physical disaster loans, and also economic injury disaster loans. So economic injury disaster loans are working capital loans. So a business did not have to have any physical damage in order to qualify for a working capital loan. So often, after there's an event, we have businesses that have had damage. They've ceased operations, or they've had some type of interruption because they're need to make repairs before they can reopen. The economic injury disaster loan helps with their working capital needs. But you also might have businesses that are feeling the business interruption, experiencing economic injury, but didn't have any physical damage at all. They are also eligible to apply for working capital.
What kind of things can a loan like that be used for a homeowner?
So the SBA home disaster loans are extremely flexible. The main uses for them is up to $200,000 to repair or replace the primary residence, and up to $40,000 to replace personal property. But we can also provide additional assistance for refinancing, and also for mitigation. So those are two extra categories where we sometimes find ourselves going above the normal limits to help out homeowners and disaster survivors.
And the interest rate on those loans is what is that typically like?
So the interest rates are pretty low. It's generally, right now, I forget what the exact interest rate is, but it's below 2% for the home loans. So it's a fixed interest rate, but it will be set each quarter, and the interest rate will match the quarter in which the incident occurred. So, if we're in, quarter two or say quarter one for this fiscal year, and the incident occurs in quarter one, it's that interest rate that will apply to it. So, and then businesses have different interest rate also.
From my perspective of having worked in a number of disasters around my region, there's always a number of misconceptions that people experience because they do receive a small business administration loan application as part of the FEMA or federal assistance process. Can you talk me through some of those misconceptions that you normally see?
So for any survivors out there who are impacted by something that ends up being declared in a major presidential disaster declaration, they're going to first start the process with registering for assistance with FEMA. Part of that registration process includes providing to FEMA some household income information and the size of the household. We provide to FEMA some thresholds to use in determining who should be referred to the SBA disaster loan program. So if the person registering or the household registering is above the minimum household income levels that we provide, then they're going to be referred to us. The next step is we encourage them to apply. They're not obligated to apply. We strongly encourage them to do so, though, because there's some other forms of assistance out there that might be dependent on them either being approved for or declined for an SBA loan. So at the end of the FEMA registration process, they have the option to also apply for an SBA disaster loan application. We're providing to them a loan to help repair damage to the home and to replace personal property. If there's any duplication with what FEMA maybe has already provided to them, we just exclude that amount from whatever we determine their damages to be, and we can loan them money for the difference. So just like FEMA has requirements to avoid duplication of benefits, SBA has the same requirements. The difference might be that we have our own loss verifiers. So when we get an application, we have a conversation with the applicant about their damages, and we do an assessment of what the physical losses are and come up with an estimate. That's the starting point for the loan. After that, we'll want to know, were there any other forms of assistance that they received? Did it, maybe from insurance, maybe from a FEMA grant, or, any other programs that might be out there. And the difference or the unmet needs is what we can loan for.
I'm sure a lot of disaster survivors who have just gone through a really traumatic experience have a lot of questions, especially, as they receive this paperwork and they're thinking about, a small business administration loan. You have a cadre of folks that actually go out to disaster areas and work with people, right?
Right. So immediately after the declaration is made, we have a team of field operations specialists and public information officers who are deployed to the field to start opening up disaster recovery centers. They staff those same disaster recovery centers with FEMA and state officials. We also open up SBA business recovery centers to help business applicants with the process. And they meet one-on-one with the survivors to help explain the entire process, because it can be really overwhelming. A survivor is going to have to deal with probably, their insurance claims adjuster. They're going to be dealing with the FEMA assistance process. They'll be dealing with the SBA disaster loan program, and they might be dealing with state and local officials, if they're having to do major repairs and things. So it can be really overwhelming, a lot of information floating around, but we are there in the community, in the centers, to provide one-on-one assistance.
You mentioned FEMA assistance, Small Business Administration assistance, or loans, and then the potential for insurance. Is there a sequence there that people need to be thinking about? Do they have to wait for insurance before they apply for the loan? What is the process there? So
this is one of the really great things about the SBA disaster loan program, and one of the ways that we're flexible and we can help speed up recovery. If you have insurance, you do not have to wait until the claim's been settled in order to apply or receive your SBA disaster loan. We can approve and disperse funds even before the insurance claim has been settled. And we advise survivors who are out there with insurance claims that they don't wait to apply for an SBA loan. Begin the process as soon as possible, even at the same time you're filing your insurance claim. Because if you run into any delays on the insurance side, you don't want that to, delay your overall recovery. So if we can approve your loan and have that ready for you when you're ready to start your rebuilding, that's great. We'll disperse the funds, and later, if the insurance claim is settled, if there's any duplication, it can just go to pay down the principal balance of the loan. But at least you haven't had to stop or slow down your recovery.
Does SBA loan application count as a credit inquiry on your credit report?
So we do run credit, but it's not a hard inquiry. The three main things we look at when qualifying applicants for a loan is, one, eligibility. So meaning, did they have an eligible type of loss in a declared county? Two is satisfactory credit. Is the credit satisfactory to SBA? And we're not a traditional lender. We're much more aggressive in trying to make as many loans as we can, and we're a lot more flexible when it comes to the credit than a traditional lender might be, because we understand that these are disaster loans and the survivors were not anticipating being in these situations. So if they have issues with their credit and they can justify them and help explain, what caused those, hopefully we can still approve the loan application. And the third and probably most important thing is repayment ability. So we have to make sure that the applicants have the ability to repay the loans. Otherwise, we're setting them up to fail, So we want to make sure that they have repayment ability, they have sufficient cash flow in order to repay the loans. And we have several different ways to help approve as many loans as we can. Like I was mentioning, the terms can go out as far as 30 years to help keep the payments lower. We have anywhere from a 6 to maybe a year deferment on the loans, depending on depending on the scope of the disaster. Larger events, we typically will go out a full year and give them a year deferment before they have to make the first payment. We can sometimes include refinancing of an existing mortgage in order to help bring down the overall fixed debt.
A lot of the survivors that go through a disaster, as they go through the process of rebuilding, one of the themes that I've heard is that people want to build back better and smarter and stronger. Can they do that with an SBA loan? I mean, are there funds available to build back in a way that might reduce the risk for future disaster?
This is really one of the probably best and untapped resources of the SBA Disaster Loan Program is the ability to increase assistance for mitigation. So we can provide additional assistance to do mitigation measures, anything from reinforcing the roof to prevent water from entering, to elevation, even the construction or installing of safe rooms and storm shelters can fall within mitigation. We can provide up to 20% of the total verified losses that SBA has verified to be used towards mitigation, which can be quite a lot. Imagine you have $100,000 in damage. 20% of that we could provide for you to do a mitigation project. And then it becomes a resource for property owners to, when they're building back, to really implement some stronger building standards.
Of course, the bulk of the work that FEMA does is responding to, mitigating from disasters. But a large priority of FEMA, at least within our strategic plan and the focus of our workforce, is thinking about how we can become more resilient. And I know that SBA is a partner in that resiliency effort. What are some of the things that SBA is doing to prioritize that?
So on an interagency level, we're really involved in the National Mitigation Investment Strategy. So working with FEMA and the other federal partners to identify ways that we can coordinate these different programs. Like I was mentioning, SBA's ability to increase disaster loans to include mitigation is a feature that not a lot of the other partners know about. But there are a lot of other partners out there who are experts on mitigation. Now, I wouldn't say that SBA's subject matter experts in mitigation. Our expertise is more in lending. So we really need that partnership with FEMA and, say, state and local hazard mitigation partners to help promote that feature of the loan program. So we're encouraging individual property owners post-disaster to rebuild stronger, and the SBA disaster loan is a way that they can do it and make it affordable.
I want to talk a little bit about helping businesses recover and the disaster loans that SBA offers there. You talked about capital loans, but are there any examples of where that really stand out in your mind of how SBA has really helped businesses in disasters?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot, actually. So as I was mentioning, there's two kinds of business disaster loans that we provide. Business physical disaster loans, we can provide up to $2 million to help make repairs to the structure, replace inventory, replace machinery and equipment, furniture and fixtures, leasehold improvements. And then also we can provide up to $2 million for working capital. Our legislative limit on business disaster loans is $2 million, but under certain circumstances, we can go above $2 million. If the business is considered a major source of employment, we can go above $2 million. And we've done that several times in the past. Every year during Small Business Week, SBA features a small business and awards them what we call the Phoenix Award for recovery. Last year, it was awarded to a business called Cheeseburger Baby in South Florida, who had damages from Hurricane Irma. And a really great story about a small business that had damage to their storefront and to their food trucks, decided to, invest back into their own business and come back stronger. And then had a really great success story this year with the Super Bowl being there in their community, and they were one of the small businesses featured there to help feed the different events that were going on. So this year, Small Business Week will be awarding another Phoenix Award to another small business, telling that story about how the SBA disaster loans have helped businesses recover. But I should say, the assistance at SBA loans is just one part of it. It takes a lot, to be a small business owner, and then even more to recover from an event like a hurricane or a tornado or an earthquake. So we're happy that, the loans are able to help them, but there's so many other things that have to go right for a small business to be able to recover. We have a lot of partners that help us with that, and that includes the programs at SBA through our regional and district offices that are out there acting as advocates for small businesses every day. And then also we have an entire network of resource partners that provide free counseling services and technical assistance to businesses, which is really important post-disaster because, we're providing funds to help them with the repair costs. But it's the counseling services that really help them look forward on making adjustments to their business plan.
All too often, I think we think about disaster preparedness when it's too late, right? And so when a business wants to take the time now to think what might happen in the event that they're affected by a disaster, they're going to be looking for resources. So what resources does the SBA have to help businesses both prepare for disasters, but also understand what they're up against if they were to be affected by a disaster?
So SBA has some really great resources. I encourage businesses to go out to sba.gov/disaster to look at checklists for things that you can do to prepare for any kind of event that might be coming up. We have different checklists for hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes, and other types of severe weather. Also, you'll see on that page examples of past disasters that we've provided assistance for, or current disasters that we're currently responding to. And I'd also say, go and look at the different loan documents that you might actually have to file in case you're ever in that situation. A lot of different business disaster preparedness plans that we've seen have some really great tips. Come up with a communications plan, assess your insurance to make sure you're covered for all your most critical functions and equipment. Think about alternative sites. There's all kinds of different elements to a preparedness plan, but a lot of them stop short of actually putting together the things that you're going to need when you apply for assistance. And so you can, any business can go on our website and go find the application just to get an idea of the kinds of things that they might have to submit, which includes, financial statements, profit and loss statements, balance sheets. Businesses should keep updated copies of those and make sure that they're accessible. It used to be we would tell businesses, keep those records 50 miles away from you someplace in case something happened to you where you're at, right? A flooding event or something that damaged all of your records. At least they would be safe, in an alternate location. But with today's technology, we don't have to do that. They can keep them in the cloud and have them available to them electronically. But there's still a lot of, I think, businesses, even, homeowners and renters who aren't doing that. Keep that information someplace where you can find it and you can access it when you need to apply for assistance.
We welcome your comments and suggestions on this and future episodes. Help us to improve the podcast by rating us and leaving a comment. If you have ideas for future topics, send us an email at FEMA-podcast@fema.dhs.gov. If you'd like to learn more about this episode or other topics, visit FEMA.gov/podcast.